I gotta go to work. Come on. I'm Richard Pryor, and I urge you to watch South Africa Now.
From Global Vision, the TV news magazine of Southern Africa.
The Protection of Information Act threatens journalists with jail.
It's got nothing to do with government policy. It's got nothing to do with apartheid or anything like that.
Because it is important that people know what is happening.
South Africa Now. This week, reporting these stories. In Southwest Africa, peace is inching closer. When will Namibia become independent?
The victory is certain, but we know also at this time that Namibia's independence is not home yet.
I feel guilty as a parent. Why did I bring children that I cannot protect, who must be brutalized like this?
Are children being tortured in South Africa? It depends on who you talk to. You'll see the South African government's attempt to refute the BBC.
If you see a police van, don't worry. We're interested in the people trying to force you to stay out of school. If somebody can convince you to stay out of school, it's your choice.
He's going to kill her.
And in our culture section, the controversy behind Shaka Zulu. Why critics say it's South African propaganda. All of these stories on South Africa Now, with hosts Fana Kekana and Carolyn Craven.
Abusheni, the Southwest African peace agreement that was and wasn't is again. Negotiators have agreed on a compromise that should provide for Namibia's independence, but it's not over yet. Cuba, Angola, and South Africa have been the official participants, with the United States acting as a mediator. The future of Namibia has been a central issue. Joining us in the studio to discuss the implications of these developments are Theo-Ben Gurirab, Foreign Minister of SWAPO, the Namibian Liberation Movement, and Michael Clough, Senior Analyst at the Council on Foreign Relations. Our first question is to SWAPO. Do you believe this is a genuine breakthrough? Do you think Namibia will finally achieve its independence?
It has been a long struggle. It is yet another building block towards Namibia's independence. We believe we are winning. The victory is certain. But we know also at this time that Namibia's independence is not home yet. We welcome it as a major step in the right direction, but until and unless we are back home, inside in Namibia, we can only remain cautiously optimistic at this point in time.
Mr. Gurirab, South Africa has made agreements before. For example, the Nkomati Accord that they had with Mozambique, which Pretoria ended up not honoring. What's your view? Do you trust them?
We do not think of Nkomati kind of an agreement with South Africa. We have always maintained a position that there is no contradiction between negotiations and the fighting. In August, we welcomed the agreements worked out by the quadripartite talks in Geneva by agreeing to observe a de facto ceasefire. And we remain hopeful that finally agreements will be worked out as it is now scheduled in Congo-Brazzaville that would lead to the beginning of the implementation process of the UN plan.
The peace agreement, which had still not been ratified by South Africa as of this taping, also involves the war in Angola. Mr. Clough, what are its provisions in terms of the troops in Angola and Jonas Savimbi's UNITA?
Well, the agreement provides for a phased Cuban troop withdrawal over a 27-month period, with the bulk of the withdrawal coming within the first 12 months. There are also a fairly complicated set of provisions which have not yet been made public, but which appear to involve phasing of that withdrawal. There's a certain number of troops which will be withdrawn immediately upon the beginning of the implementation of the agreement. Other provisions would would allow for the Cubans to be brought northward away from the Namibian border, so that by the time of the actual agreement or implementation of the Namibian agreement, some 7 months after the beginning of the process, the Cuban troops will be at about roughly 250 miles away from the Namibian border. As far as UNITA itself is involved, there is no explicit agreement, or there's no explicit provision within the agreement relating to UNITA.
Is there any agreement between President-elect Bush and Jonas Savimbi of UNITA?
I don't think so. I mean, there have been reports that Bush has sent a message to Savimbi saying that the United States will continue its support until there is an agreement inside Angola itself. But I think at this point it's still very much up in the air as to what U.S. policy towards UNITA will be once an agreement has actually been signed.
And to follow up on recent stories, the treason trial we told you about ended with 4 of the 19 people convicted and now facing the death penalty. 7 others were found guilty of terrorism and can be hung. 8 were acquitted. Sentencing is expected soon. Archbishop Tutu said that he was shattered by the verdict because it has criminalized all peaceful protest. We have told you about fire bombings of anti-apartheid organizations. A 23-year-old ex-policeman who identified himself as the head of the White Wolves, the group which claimed credit for many bombings, was arrested after opening fire on black people in the streets of Pretoria, with a final death toll of 6 and 17 wounded. In response, the government banned a small extremist white fringe group. Last week, we introduced you to the editor of Vrye Weekblad, an anti-apartheid Afrikaans language newspaper. Now, after just 2 editions, the paper has had its registration suspended because several stories offended the government. And finally, contrary to all the rumors, Nelson Mandela was not freed.
A program where all voices of the region can be heard.
This is the kind of show that we need, you know. We need independent, clear, objective journalism. Someone who can present the real story without being afraid that they're going to get bounced out of South Africa, you know, get thrown out or something because they said the wrong thing.
South Africa's black children, victims of brutality as the anti-apartheid movement contends, or as the government claims, victims of the anti-apartheid movement. One recent BBC broadcast touched off a volatile controversy in England. Now the South African government has sent South Africa Now a video response to the film Sopher the Children. We'll take a closer look at how critics and defenders of apartheid handle the same issue.
I mean, these are babies, man. Babies, any right-thinking person. It seems as though it is a sin to bring a child on earth. It seems as though it's a crime. I feel guilty as a parent. Why did I bring children that I cannot protect, who must be brutalized like this?
Children and apartheid is one of the most emotionally loaded aspects of conflict in South Africa. News reports have shown children on the front lines of the fighting. Thousands have been detained. Many have charged brutality. Documentaries have been made about the subject, including Sharon Sopher's Witness to Apartheid.
Before he was detained and beaten, did he have this problem speaking?
After abortion. No, I was clear before when I was arrested.
I'm sorry?
I was clear, nothing wrong with me when I was arrested.
And the CBS film, Children of Apartheid.
What do South Africa's young people think of their future? What are their hopes for tomorrow? Their fears?
But this film, broadcast by the BBC, Sopher the Children, is the only one to have earned a full-scale 16-minute South African rebuttal.
This film is principally about the children of South Africa. some of whom have experienced detention and torture at the hands of the security police, and others, both black and white, who are having to cope with growing up in such a divided society.
Director of Sopher the Children, Nicholas Claxton.
The film Sopher the Children went out on the BBC on June the 8th this year. Straight after the film went out, the South African government responded fairly vehemently towards both the BBC and the independent production company Penumbra Productions, whom I made the film for, and about myself personally. The fact that I hadn't received official approval, or the fact that I hadn't actually officially asked to go into South Africa to make the film, was one particular cause of concern to the South African authorities.
The South African government has sent us a copy of The Other Side of the Picture, their attempt to counter the charges in the film Sopher the Children.
The question which must be asked is, why has Sopher the Children almost totally ignored what these children have been doing? There are fleeting references to cars and schools being burnt, but no reference to the murders that have been committed by the children. Surely a grave omission if we are to seriously examine the complex issue of the children.
They said they would take me home to fetch the petrol bombs, and should they find them, they would beat me to death.
Emotional, mostly unsubstantiated accusations are characteristic of the hysteria surrounding the South African issue, showing the children as pictures of innocence fighting the monstrous apartheid system.
The police were interrogating me, and I told them that I know nothing, and they started punching me with their fists and knocked my teeth out.
Then there is the question of William, seen here being interviewed in Sopher the Children. He was detained by the police for having, by his own admission, been involved in arson, attempting to burn down a school, and then the most serious charge, flinging petrol bombs at traveling vehicles, seriously endangering the lives of innocent human beings. This, of course, is not explained in Sopher the Children. And it is in this area of street violence that the greatest dilemma faces the authorities. For when it is obvious that the parents have no control over their children, or in fact may be encouraging their children to pursue acts of violence, do you simply allow a known offender back onto the streets to immediately carry on with acts which could lead to the death of an innocent person?
Then they took me to the electric shock room. Then I was forced to make a confession against my will. They put a baby's dummy in my mouth and pressed me against the wall, covered my head with a wet sack, then connected electric wires to my toes.
William has subsequently admitted that he lied for the Sopher the Children cameras. He has admitted that he simply said what he was told to say by his mother and two accompanying activists, one known as Opa and the other as Sophie.
You also said that you were forced to make and to sign a statement.
No, it's not.
You also said that you were taken to a special shock room where you were elected guilty. Is that the truth?
Hante mos tshwantsho mola bua puo ya wena fela ba go tsaya ba go isa ka kamereng e nngwe fo e leng gore ba fitlhe ba go soka ke. No, that's not.
Why did you say it?
Why we are? Sophie told me to say so.
Subsequently, I discover by a news cutting from South Africa by one of the chief crime reporters, written by him in one of the major South African newspapers, that in fact this particular child concerned had been, quotes, captured on video by a South African police video unit.
If you see police van, don't worry. We're interested in the people trying to force you to stay out of school.
So the apartheid debate has now been joined on television. It's now up to the viewers to decide.
These films should be shown in South Africa, and the South African public can make up their own mind which version is true and which version is false.
South Africa Now will be seen every week at this time. Coming up next, our cultural segment featuring the best music, film, drama, and artistic expressions from Southern Africa.
You may have seen it on TV again. A mini-series called Shaka Zulu, recently rerun on national television. The TV drama purported to tell the story of a great Zulu king and his battles with colonialism. But actually there was, critics claim, a propaganda subtext that most Americans missed.
Shaka is known as a mass murderer, a depraved ogre whose thirst for conquest knows no limits. He has deluged his country with innocent blood, disregarding the most sacred ties of affection, turning father against son, son against brother, in a bloodbath that defies description.
There really was a Shaka Zulu, and he really was a major leader whose exploits still inspire respect in Africa. But this 10-hour package of the Shaka legend provoked controversy and protest when it appeared in the U.S.
Scene after scene where there were battles being fought, people were being impaled on long, sharp wooden posts, people were being beheaded, babies were killed, and this sort of thing. So not only was Shaka depicted as a savage, but not even the noble savage that you normally find with some of what Hollywood has produced here.
The United Nations sees the miniseries as a violation of its cultural boycott of South Africa.
The producers and those responsible for its marketing, particularly in this country and in Western Europe, have tried to hide the fact that there is South African funding of the program because they know that once that is revealed, it shall be deemed to have contravened the UN boycott, cultural boycott of South Africa.
Those issues in a moment. The film itself is a lavishly produced TV drama, with more nudity probably than ever before seen on American television. Filmed on location in South Africa by a white South African director, it purports to offer the historically accurate story of a black Napoleon, a military genius given to orgies of violence in his efforts to build a Zulu nation. But how accurate is it? According to Zulu scholar Mazisi Kunene at UCLA, not very.
There is a tradition which seems to come from the colonial era of attempting to distort the history of a people. It does not say the African has no history, as it used to say before, that the African has no brain. It says he has a brain, but it is a bad one. It is capable of completely unsolicited violence, and we have to be very careful of him.
He's going to kill her. What the hell do you think you're doing? In God's name, we've got to stop him. We are in no position to stop anything. What would you have me do? Just sit here and watch? Yes, Finn, that's exactly what we must do.
Here, life belongs to Shaka. Her life belongs to Shaka.
Kunene cites scenes like this ritual murder as a distortion and a caricature.
In this case, we see Shaka as a big, massive savage, quite frightening in his stature and frightening in the perspective in which he is projected even in the film. And in his relations with women, and his capacity to strip naked in public. This is unthinkable, that Shaka could strip naked in public, could drink blood.
Representatives of Harmony Gold, the company that co-produced and distributed Shaka Zulu, insist the film is faithful to historical detail. More controversial is what role, if any, the South African government played in financing and promoting the production. Anti-apartheid activist Ron Wilkins says South Africa was vitally interested in seeing it made.
The record of South Africa's parliament had one of its transcripts showed a discussion among those within the South African parliament. They said that it would help, in effect, South Africa break out of its cultural isolation that the international community has sought to impose on it, and it was a good idea, so that the film had the blessings of the South African government, and the South African Broadcasting Corporation actually put money up for the film.
The LA Times reported that when the film was marketed here, all references to South Africa's financial involvement were dropped.
Attack!
The producers say that was because South African Broadcasting paid for nothing but the right to air the film there. But since it was shot in South Africa, violating the UN cultural boycott, it was denounced by the UN Special Committee Against Apartheid.
What comes out in the film is a portrayal of intertribal rivalry and conflict, and the South African government is gently portraying South African blacks as not really worth self-government, because they spend a lot of time killing each other and feuding with each other.
Ambassador Gbeho says that telexes like these to Fox television stations went unanswered.
And we gave them the whole background about how the film was made and where it contravened the provisions of the cultural boycott, and what help it was likely to give the South African government in its attempt to whitewash apartheid. I'm afraid all this was greeted with stony silence.
Most Americans have been unaware of this controversy. The money invested in Shaka paid off with big ratings. Now Turner Broadcasting has acquired it for yet another US run.
We're going to make an appeal to Turner Broadcasting if indeed it is true that they also want to serialize it. We'll plead with them not to do so, since that effort would only constitute assistance to the apartheid, the racist apartheid regime.
So unless the protest prevails, Shaka Zulu will be back again, making lots of money while it rewrites African history.
The American producers of Shaka Zulu referred us for comment to the film's white South African director, William Four, who says he considers Shaka Zulu to be an anti-apartheid production that positively depicts black history. He told us on the phone that South African Broadcasting did play a small role in the production, and then added this comment.
For some obscure reason, people have tried to make political gain out of this situation, which I don't understand at all. And for some reason have been hammering Harmony Gold for doing what I think is a very courageous thing. They have given, in Southern Africa, black history new status. We brought very strongly home by producing this product to white South Africans that black history is as important, if not more important, than their own. And I think it was a very courageous move.
Thank you for watching South Africa Now. Transcripts are now available for $3. If you want an educational resource list or want to share your comments, write to South Africa Now, 361 West Broadway, New York, New York, 10013. South Africa Now is produced in association with the Africa Fund.